exactly what I thought it was. Firefighter Edward Kachia, referring to the collapse of the South Tower, said, "It actually gave at a lower floor, not the floor where the plane was hit. We originally had thought that there was like an internal detonation, explosives, because it went in succession, boom, 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 and then the tower came down." Assistant Fire Commissioner Stephen Gregory said, "I thought before number 2 came down, I saw low-level flashes. I saw a flash, flash, flash at the lower level of the building. You know, like when they blow up a building." Firefighter Richard Benasiski said, "There was just an explosion. It seemed like on television when they blow up these buildings. It seemed like it was going all the way around like a belt, all these explosions." The question of whether explosives had been used could have been settled by a scientific examination of the steel. However, even though removing evidence from a crime scene is usually a federal offense, the authorities allowed the steel to be quickly removed and sold as scrap metal. This removal was protested by the New York Times and Fire Engineering magazine. The 9/11 Commission, however, did not mention it. The Commission also failed to mention Mayor Giuliani's statement made to Peter Jennings that he had learned in advance that one of the towers was going to collapse. The Commission did not therefore need to ask Giuliani why anyone prior to the collapse of the South Tower would have expected it to collapse, given the fact there was no objective evidence or historical precedent for such a collapse. The Commission also did not mention that the CEO of the company that was in charge of security for the World Trade Center was Wirt Walker III, the president's cousin, or that Marvin Bush, the president's brother, had been one of the company's directors. The Commission also omitted many vital facts about the collapse of Building 7. This collapse is especially important because the collapses of the Twin Towers are usually attributed partly to the impact of the airplanes, but Building 7 was not struck by a plane, and yet it collapsed in essentially the same way, showing all the signs of a controlled demolition. The Commission did not mention these facts. It also did not mention that firefighters were removed from Building 7 several hours in advance because someone spread word that it was going to collapse, even though there were, according to all available photographs, fires on only a few of this building's 47 floors. The Commission again could have included some interesting quotations from the 9/11 oral histories. For example, DeCosta Wright, a medical technician, said, "I think the 4th floor was on fire. We were like, are you guys going to put out that fire?" Chief Thomas McCarthy said, "They were waiting for 7 World Trade to come down. They had fire on 3 separate floors, just burning merrily. It was pretty amazing, you know. It's the afternoon in Lower Manhattan. A major high-rise building is burning, and they say, 'We know.'" But the Commission says nothing about this decision not to fight the fires based on advanced knowledge that the building was going to collapse. The Commission also did not mention that Larry Silverstein, the building's owner, said on a PBS show that he and the fire department commander decided it would be best to pull the building, after which we watched the building collapse.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that they were not sure they were going to be able to contain the fire. And I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. Maybe the smartest thing to do is pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
The Commission avoided pointing out any of these things by simply not finding any room in its 571-page book to mention the fact that Building 7 collapsed, even though it was supposedly the first large steel frame building in history to collapse solely because of fire. There are also many omissions and distortions related to Flight 77. According to the Commission's new timeline, the FAA did not notify the military about Flight 77 before it struck the Pentagon. NORAD's previous timeline, to be sure, had said that the FAA had provided this notification at 9:24. Critics had then pointed out that this notification, coming 14 minutes before the Pentagon was struck, meant that the military should have been able to prevent the strike. The Commission's new story avoids this problem by simply declaring NORAD's earlier statement incorrect, again ignoring the question of whether NORAD officials had been lying or were simply afflicted by terrible memories. Another problem for the Commission's claim is that there were 3 teleconferences going on by then. Why did the military not learn about Flight 77 from, say, the FAA's teleconference, which even the Commission agreed began by 9:20? Because, we are told, the person at the National Military Command Center in the Pentagon who was assigned to this teleconference found it worthless and hence didn't pay attention. This account, however, ignores Laura Brown's memo, which reported that the FAA had connected with both the Pentagon and NORAD, with which the FAA shared real-time information about all the flights of interest, including Flight 77. Her memo said, in other words, that the FAA had told the military about Flight 77 long before 9/24. Commissioner Benveniste commented on the significance of this statement at the hearing in which he read the memo into the record. But the Commission wrote its final report as if this memo and that conversation never occurred. The Commission also had another problem. Fighters had clearly taken off from Langley Air Force Base at 9:30 that morning. NORAD had said that they were sent up after it had received notification about Flight 77's hijacking at 9:24. The Commission handled this problem by simply declaring NORAD's statement incorrect. But then the Commission had to explain why the Langley jets took off at 9:30. The Commission did this by means of a new concept, Phantom Flight 11. That is, the Langley fighters that were really scrambled in response to a false report from the FAA that Flight 11 was still aloft and headed towards Washington. The proof of this claim, we are assured, is provided by an audio file on which someone from the FAA Center in Boston told someone at Needs about this flight. No reporter can confirm this story, however, because the Commission was unable to identify the source of this mistaken FAA information. But the Commission failed to explain why, given the sophisticated voice identification techniques now available, it could not identify the 2 individuals on this audio file. I turn now to problems in the Commission's treatment of the strike on the Pentagon. The Commission claimed that no one knew that an aircraft was headed towards Washington until about 9:36, just a couple minutes before it struck the Pentagon. But Secretary of Transportation Norman Mineta had reported a conversation showing that Vice President Cheney, along with others in the shelter conference room under the White House, knew at least 10 minutes earlier that an aircraft was approaching. The Commission, in claiming otherwise, simply made no mention of Mineta's report, even though it had been given in open testimony to the Commission. The Commission also failed to deal with many problems in the claim that the aircraft that hit the Pentagon was Flight 77 under the control of Hani Hanjour. For example, the aircraft, in order to hit the West Wing, reportedly executed a downward spiral that would have been difficult for an accomplished pilot. And yet Hanjour was known as a terrible pilot. The Commission handled this problem by admitting Hanjour's deficiencies on some pages, while claiming elsewhere that he was given this assignment because he was the operation's most experienced pilot. The Commission also failed to point out that if terrorists had wanted to cause maximal death and destruction, the West Wing would have been their last choice. It had been reinforced so the damage was less severe than a strike on any other place of the Pentagon would have been. It was still being renovated, so relatively few people were killed. And the Secretary of Defense and all the top brass were in the East Wing, as far removed from the West Wing as possible. The Commission also failed to discuss several factors that have led some critics to conclude that the aircraft that hit the Pentagon was not even a Boeing 757. This controversy could be cleared up by simply showing the videos that were confiscated from the security cameras at the nearby Sheraton Hotel and the Citgo gas station. But the Commission failed to subpoena them or even to mention their existence. Finally, the Commission claimed that Al-Qaeda hijackers did not strike a nuclear plant because they feared that their plane would be shot down by anti-aircraft defense systems. But the Commission failed to discuss whether the Pentagon is not protected by some such system, which would normally shoot down any aircraft without a U.S. military transponder. There are also many serious omissions and distortions in the Commission's treatment of Flight 93. One thing omitted is considerable evidence that Flight 93 was shot down by our own military. The Commission addressed this question only indirectly by constructing another new timeline, according to which the military did not learn about the hijacking of Flight 93 until it had crashed. This claim, however, required ignoring Laura Brown's memo one more time. The Commission also claimed that the military could not have learned about Flight 93 from the White House video conference organized by Richard Clark because it did not include the right officials from both the FAA and the Defense Department. But Clark's book, Against All Enemies, states that the FAA was represented by its head, Jane Garvey, and the Defense Department was represented by Secretary Rumsfeld and General Richard Myers, who was then acting chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. These were surely the right people. Clark says, moreover, that Garvey's list of potential hijackers, which Garvey read while Myers and Rumsfeld were listening, included United 93 over Pennsylvania. The Commission's new timeline also claimed that the shoot-down order was not issued by Cheney until after 10:10, hence 7 or more minutes after Flight 93 had crashed, and that the order was not received by Richard Clark until 10:25. The Commission omitted the fact, however, that Clark said that he received the order at about 9:50. The Commission also failed to mention that according to ABC News, Colonel Marr at Needs received the shoot-down order and then instructed fighter pilots to destroy the airliner. Another part of the Commission's new timeline is its claim that the Vice President did not arrive in the shelter conference room until shortly before 10. In making this claim, however, the Commission had to ignore many previous reports, including Norman Minetta's testimony to the Commission itself that Cheney was already in charge down there when Minetta arrived at 9:20. This is part of the evidence that has led me to the conclusion that the 9/11 Commission report is a 571-page lie. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Professor Griffin. My question's very short. I think your research speaks for itself abundantly. My only question is, in your opinion, what should be done with these people who are obviously engaged in a criminal act? And I have to point out that there's people in the mafia who are serving long federal prison sentences for crimes that had much less evidence and were far more circumstantial than what I think you've discovered in your research. So here we have the same bunch, the Bush gang, that was responsible for Iran-Contra and the subsets of BCCI and the SNL scandals, the same group that stole the 2000 election in Florida, and post 9/11, the same group that took this nation to war based on lies and now have participated in population decimation in New Orleans, Louisiana, and Mississippi. Based on that, what do you think? Should RICO come into play, the Racketeer Influence Corrupt Organizations Act, at the very least, and at the very most, charging these people with what my gut feeling is that they committed treason against the United States of America?
Well, thank you very much for presuming I might have an answer to that question. But there is an answer, where we can start anyway. It's for our Congress and our press to start doing its job. And so we can hope that what's going on in this room today is a start. And obviously, if anything is